cafe. Anyway.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Yes, it's daily. It's a daily podcast. Yeah, to do on the podcasting. My name's Mike.
Mike's Daily Podcast.
Welcome to Mike's Daily Podcast. My name is Mike Matthews. How are you doing today? Did you choose to have a good day? Or did you just kind of go, this doesn't matter anyway. I'm alive. Who cares? But yes, you should be thankful for every day that you
Mike's Daily Podcast.
get out of bed and start something and do something. You have the potential to change the world and all that stuff. Yes, that's true.
Mike's
So I'm here
Daily
to tell you
Podcast.
about interesting stuff.
Yeah.
And make the most of your time, because David Crosby, of course, of Crosby, Stills, Nash Young, and the Byrds. We were talking about him yesterday and about this interesting podcast he did with a good friend of his. They talked about all kinds of stuff, philosophical things, and one of the big regrets that David Crosby had, that he was really just upset about, and you can hear it in the podcast that he does with his friend, that I forget the guy's name, but he says there is just not enough time, and all the time I've wasted in my life, all this wasted time, I could have been doing other stuff. He said, I still want to learn 8 languages. I want to read up on history of something or other. There's still a lot he wanted to do, and instead he wasted it, he said. And I don't know specifically how he wasted it. I guess I'd have to hear the whole podcast, but it is very interesting too that I didn't realize he had a falling out with Graham Nash. I know he and David Crosby used to hang out in downtown Ventura when I lived there. And they used to go to this place called Cafe Voltaire in the 90s.
And here's today's podcast picture.
They would show up and just listen to music, and sometimes they brought some people, that were like discovered talent. They were buds, and I guess they weren't towards the end of David Crosby's life, which is some of those big names, big musical acts don't end so well when someone passes away. There's a falling out that happens, and that happened actually with Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings. They weren't on the best of terms at the end. But that's something, time is of the essence, and the late great Basil the Boxer says make the most of it. And if you have a person that you have a bad, what's he saying? If there's someone that you have left things off on a bad foot, try and get it fixed. And I can see why David didn't do it. Why he didn't, what time he had left. Why he didn't do it. And I know the whole thing about, I've wasted so much time with this particular person, I'm just going to write them off. I'm just going to leave it unresolved. No reconciliation. I understand why that some people don't want to waste the time, but now Graham Nash is walking around going, oh man, that ended badly. And maybe, I think Neil Young too, they didn't resolve their differences either. So that's too bad. And it should make us reflect and think about what these stupid grudges are that we hold on to. And if they're really, really important people in our lives, why do we continue the conflict and the wall and the schism? Oh, they did this to me, Mike. They'll never be forgiven. Well, there's something to the forget and forgive and the Bible's mantra of forgiveness and all of that. There's a lot to that. So forgiveness was also a thing that Don Henley, all these people used to call up when I was doing radio in the early 90s. I want to hear the song Forgiveness by Don Henley. No, it's called Heart of the Matter. I've been trying to get down to the heart of the matter, but my will gets weak. and the ashes will scatter. I think it's about forgiveness. Forgiveness, even if you don't love me anymore. The podcast picture today. Oh, I almost forgot that. Thank you, A-Frame, for reminding me. Yes, it is of Niles. And the last podcast picture was of Stevenson Pond, which is not too far away from Niles. But I was in that general vicinity tonight, and I took a picture, and the sunset was happening. And so see that picture at mikesdailypodcast.com and all the past podcast pictures. A majority of Americans believe that the U.S. is weak. This according to Just the News. A clear majority of Americans consider the nation to be in a weak position as President Joe Biden prepares to address the country in his upcoming State of the Union speech. Nearly two-thirds, 62% of respondents in a recent Marist poll indicated that the union was either not very strong or not strong at all, compared with just 36% of those who said it was strong or very strong. Independents held the most sour view, with 72% of that group concerned about the strength of the country, compared to 69% of Republicans and 48% of Democrats. What does that mean with all those independents? Well, those independents could end up going Republican. The Marist poll said President Biden's job approval ratings among Americans is 43%, identical to his rating in December of 2022. So it has not changed in a month, apparently. 48% of residents disapprove, 9% are unsure, while 19% of Americans strongly approve of Biden's job performance. 36% strongly disapprove. So is that typical for a president midway through his term, his first term? I don't know. But there's another poll that says Americans say that the top problem in the country is government leadership. This from the New York Post. Americans now say that a lack of leadership, as we go outside a cafe anyway, where we bring in Mike's Daily Podcast, somewhere in Podcastro Valley, the last place on earth.
Anyway,
that a lack of leadership from President Biden and the Congress. So the Congress is also to blame. And now, don't forget that the House of Representatives is now controlled by the Republicans. And don't forget the Supreme Court basically is controlled by the Republicans. President Biden and the Congress is the country's biggest problem, outpacing inflation, the immigration crisis, and the state of the economy. This was a poll released yesterday. Despite Americans getting socked in the wallet, quote, the government poor leadership took over the number one spot from inflation over the past year, with 21% of Americans naming it as the most important problem facing this country today, compared to 15% who said so last year, this according to the New York Post. But perhaps you prefer a more liberal network. CNN has been called liberal. Perhaps you've heard that. Well, CNN has reached its lowest ratings in 9 years. It's not news necessarily that CNN is not keeping up with the post-Trump administration times we live in, despite a change in course directed by news boss Chris Licht following a merger between CNN's parent company and Discovery. But when tanking ratings continue to sink to levels not seen in nearly a decade, CNN just notched its lowest ratings in 9 years across all its day parts for the week of January 16th through the 22nd of this year, averaging just 444,000 viewers in prime time, 93,000 in the all-important ages 25 to 54 news demographic. Yes, 25-year-olds are concerned about news. And 417,000 in viewers and 80,000 in the demo for total day. It's the first time since May of 2014 that the network failed to reach 450,000 viewers. That from The Wrap and from writer Spencer Brown. So what does that mean? I don't have a exact analysis of how Fox is doing, MSNBC, Any other news channel you prefer? Newsmax. What was the Russian one? RTV. Does that even exist anymore? Foreign-owned news companies. I think they've been booted. I may be wrong. Then there's this little bit, and that is the DOJ prosecutors, Department of Justice prosecutors, filed the request late Friday with U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan after they discovered a message from Bankman-Fried to the General Counsel of FTX on the Signal messaging app, according to their letter to the judge. DOJ requested a revision to the Sam Bankman-Fried's bail condition after discovering he reached out to witnesses. The prosecutors interpreted that exchange as a sign that Bankman-Fried may try to influence witnesses in his upcoming trial that have incriminating efforts against him. They requested that the judge revise the conditions of his bail to prohibit communications with current or former employees of FTX or Alameda Research, the hedge fund he founded, that is also in bankrupt proceedings, unless the DOJ waives the restriction or a lawyer is present for the exchange. That from Fox News. FTX, how it has fallen. Used to have big commercials during a Super Bowl, which is coming up. And speaking of the money industry and odd things going on in the world of business, investment managers are going to invest under ESG regulations. Republican states are suing. A number of Republican-led states are suing the Biden administration over a new rule that forces retirement investment managers to favor environmental, social, and governing, or ESG-friendly companies over profits or return on investment for retirees. This puts the retirement of millions at risk and turns retirement accounts into a social experiment for climate activists, according to Katie Pavlich. Fox News says it is now facing a lawsuit from Fox News isn't, but is facing a lawsuit from Utah and 24 other states who argue that it violates the Employee Retirement Income Security Act, or ERISA. That was from 1974, that act, which says that retirement plan assets must be held for the exclusive purpose of providing benefits to participants in the plan, and that the fiduciaries must act solely in the participants' interests. The GOP-led states say that by focusing on social and political agendas, plan managers will be compromising the growth potential of participants' accounts, according to Fox News. Will this be as big a story as states banning gas ovens, gas stoves? I don't know, but that's something that I don't get too excited about. I have an electric stove. I can work with it, but some people, gas stoves. Now, when the power goes out, a gas stove will be your savior, because you need it. With the electric stove, you can't cook. My quote unquote gas stove is outside. It's the grill, the propane tank. That's my gas stove. If that's gonna get banned too, or maybe this is all hysteria, I don't know. But outside a cafe anyway, somewhere in Podcaster Valley, look who's here. Hello, Michael Masters, Madame Rootabega, and yes, all of this is hysteria. Ooh. Like that Def Leppard album. Do you like that Def Leppard album? Yes. Do you like the fact that everything you hear on conservative talk radio is hysteria? Yes. Do you like White Lotus? No. Really? We just started watching that. And Mike White, and I went to high school with a Mike White, but it kind of looks like the same guy, but I don't think it is. Anyway, Mike White had a lot to do with one of my favorite movies of all time, Nacho Libre. He worked very closely with Jack Black, did School of Rock with him. He actually stars in it. So this is an interesting I've only gotten slightly through the first season, but yeah, it's got some language, like the other thing I was talking about the other day, the other show, Poker Face. It's got some language, but some of the writing, I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. That's pretty interesting what they did there. Look who else is here. Hello there, Mike. This is Valentino, the parking attendant. And this is Bison Bentley. Do you know that? Mike, my holiday is coming up real soon there. Valentino's Day. Yeah, Valentino's Day. Do you know that? It's Valentine's Day, guys. But thank you. We're looking forward to Valentino's Day. Yeah, it's going to be a good day. Yeah, good. Do you know that? Excellent. Outside of Cafe Anyway, I want to thank you for listening. If you'd like to chime in about any of the news stories today that we covered that were oh so fascinating, you can call me 510-228-4640, 510-228-4640. You know, the last podcast, I was doing a little bit of the venting, and I'm preventing myself from venting. But here's the thing is, this morning, after all of the stuff I was venting about just getting texts and emails that ask some really, like, can you just think through the question you're about to ask before you ask it? Use some common sense and you will get an answer. You will not need me if you use your common sense. After I went on that sort of a rant the past couple podcasts, I was literally inundated with that sort of tomfoolery today. Just the craziest questions. And I love the people that ask the questions. They're wonderful people. I would not want a single hair on their heads hurt. But I cannot believe, like, they just don't. It's almost like I'm too accessible is the problem. But if you want to access me, because the very good, efficient accessibility, when people have easy access to you, they will throw stupid questions at you. And they will deter you and waste your time. As David Crosby told us, time is very valuable. And his biggest regret, his biggest wish towards the end of his life was to have more time. And that will probably be the same for all of us. So let's make the most of it, shall we? And use our common sense. It's right there in our brain. And quit wasting Mike's time. Next show, it'll be the wonderful Chely Shoehart, Floyd the Floorman, and John Deere, the engineer, with more ways to reach me. It's A-Frame. Oh, and did I mention that was FFF so 2554, 2554.
Mike's Daily Podcast is written and produced and performed by Mike Matthews. His podcast is super easy to find. Download or listen to his show and read his blog at mikesdailypodcast.com. Email Mike now at mikesdailypodcast@gmail.com. See you tomorrow. Bye!